Thank you. It is a pleasure for Lisa and I to be here. And Lisa, why don't you stand, since you're down front with us here, and let you get a look at her, my much better half. One of the questions we get asked a lot on the road, the guys, are, how did you wind up with such beautiful women? And I don't know why they would ask that. It's the implication is that, something's wrong with us. And I usually say, well, you can tell we all outkicked our coverage. But I asked them, I put it back on them. I said, well, why do you think we got such pretty wives? And they said, well, it must be because you were all rich. You got a lot of money. And I was like, nope, that's not the case at all, because when we met all our wives, they supported us in the early days. Lisa can tell you stories. So it must be our charming personality is all I can figure. I am the beardless brother from Duck Dynasty, if you didn't know that, if you're just passing through and wondering who this guy is. My wife says that I'm the best-looking Robertson, but as you can see from the picture, I don't know if that's really a compliment or not. The bar is pretty low, right? It's not hard to shine with a group like that, is it? I mean, when you think about it. And, of course, it's interesting because everybody has their own take. Lisa says her worst nightmare is to roll over and see that somebody looks like Dad or Willie. But then Mom says if she rolled over and Dad didn't have a beard, she would think she committed adultery, is what she says. So just to give you the different perspectives of what that's like, Dad's beard has gone from jet black and thick to very wispy, kind of like Spanish moss these days, as you can see. And he started trying to put a little color on it because he says he's flaring too many ducks. So, but you can tell Godwin back there, he's got a deer flag for a goatee, so we have to keep him covered up as well. I can grow a beard. I do choose to grow one from time to time, usually every hunting season. The problem is that when I grow a beard, I get all this grief from my Uncle Si and from Dad, and they're like, well, Al's in his Yasser Arafat phase of his beard. That's what he always says. So I thought I'd make a comparison for you guys. First of all, just to show you it's not true. My beard is much more uniform than Yasser Arafat, and he was a terrorist, which I don't appreciate the implication. So usually I put it back on Dad and Si. I was like, have you two looked in the mirror lately? You keep talking to me about Yasser Arafat. I want to know who looks more like a terrorist, Al or Si and Dad. Contrary to internet rumors, we're not born with beards. You can see that from the picture, although we're not sure about Uncle Si because there's no record of his birth anywhere. So I'm thinking he was deposited here by aliens, but we'll never know for sure, will we? But I wanted to kind of illustrate a little bit about our personalities by using Labrador retrievers, because we love our labs. If anybody here is a lab owner, I'm sure you love yours because they're great dogs. And but we typically have always used black labs. Now, every once in a while we've used something different, but for most of my life, Dad always had a black lab. And the reason why is because the black lab is the go-getter in the lab family. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we got one right now named Blue, and he whimpers by the truck. He yelps, but he cannot wait to get in that cold water and go get ducks. Now, that's a dog, right? That's a go-getter. So in our family, that black lab describes my dad, the duck commander. Anytime you're the anything, it's a pretty big deal. He's the duck commander, and he's 72 years old, and he's going to be just as excited on November 16th, Friday night, the night before duck season, as he was when he was 10 years old. It's never changed about it. He loves it. He's passionate about it. The whole time he's not hunting ducks, he's preparing to hunt ducks on our property. That's what he does. He's a black lab. Now, my brother Jace is the same way. Jace loves to hunt. He's not quite as industrious about all his off time. He likes to play golf. But at the same time, he's always thinking about shooting ducks. That's what he does. I was just with him. Lisa and I were with Jason and Missy up in Lake Tahoe. And the whole time we were there, he was doing what? Looking for ducks and geese. It's just what he does. He's a black lab. So that's their personality. 60-day season, they're hunting 60 days. Now, the yellow lab is a great hunting dog. The yellow will go get your ducks, no doubt about it. I've seen some champion yellows, fierce dogs. But for the most part, and if you have a yellow, they're much more subdued. They're great service pets. You see a lot with people that need help with service pets. They're great with kids. They'll protect and look after kids. They're domesticated is what they are in the lab family. That personality describes yours truly, beardless brother, and it's easy to see when you look the way I do. I don't have to hunt every day. I have to wear face paint. I'm forced to wear face paint, so you can imagine. I'm a yellow lab. Jep, my baby sister, if you've watched the show, he's a bit sensitive, but he's a yellow lab as well. Because Jep and our philosophy is if we hadn't seen a duck in 10 days, probably time to sleep in, and then you'll tell us about what happens. We think like yellow labs. That's what we are, and we're proud of it. You take the black and the yellow, you cross them, and you begin to break down the breed of the dog a little bit, and so you get a chocolate lab, which doesn't mean that a chocolate is any less of a great dog. It's just that sometimes they don't know what they're doing. That they can be very clumsy and fall over themselves and don't even know what a duck is, or they could be a champion retriever. I've seen some chocolates that were fantastic hunting dogs. You just don't know. In our family, believe it or not, that describes my brother Willie. Now, that may surprise you if you watch the show because you're like, wait a minute. Wasn't he boss hog? Isn't he the one, running the show and all that? Exactly. Some days, he's putting it all together. He's champion chocolate. Other days, he doesn't know come here from Sikkim. I mean, that's just him. And the reason why is because he put the A and D in ADD. I mean, he's just all over the place, and it's his personality. It's what he is. And so those in the family that know him, the show didn't really portray that as much as it's a reality, but trust me, it is. And Lisa can vouch for me. So you got the black, you got the yellow, and you got the chocolate, but I really struggled to find a lab to describe my Uncle Si. He's so out there. There's only one I really know that would probably work. Unicorn liked that one a lot. I see you laughing over there. She gets it. Yeah, everybody asks me about Uncle Si. I get asked more about Si than anybody, of course. Si is the heart and soul of our show. There's no doubt about it. And the interesting thing about Si is that it shows you that network executives don't always know what they're, talking about. Si was not going to be a regular on the show. He was going to be just like Mountain Man, just like pop in every once in a while. And he quickly, within the first few episodes, we said, no, Si is the show. And there's no doubt about that. That's true. Now, Si, if you notice from this picture here, when he was going to Vietnam in 1968 versus today, the years have been unkind to Uncle Si. He's not quite the same looker he once was, but in his mind, he's the same guy. He's a ladies' man, Jack. That's what he is. And Si has been married to the same woman, Christine, for now 45 plus years. And it was really interesting because Si, was the first year of the show, nobody knew about Christine, his wife, because she's not on the show. And so they thought he was a widower. And so we get all these marriage proposals from around the country. For Si, it was mostly like a grandkid setting up his grandma. It was really cute, the letters we got. And Dad looked at me one day and he said, Al, what? I hear your Uncle Si is getting marriage proposals all across the fruited plain. And I said, yep, that's true, Dad. And he said, what is wrong with womanhood in America that they would desire to marry your Uncle Si? And I said, well, Dad, I don't know, but I can tell you this. Here's something else that's strange. 90% of the marriage proposals have come from the state of Alabama. So I don't know what that means, but every time I say that, everybody laughs. So you must know what it means. Si's a trip. Si's a great guy. Si's a very spiritual guy. And I guarantee this morning, it was a little late now, but he was right there at Whites Ferry Road if he was in town, belting them out as loud as he could. He loves to sing. In fact, so much so that he started a music career in Nashville as a country singer. And he has a band, and they're called, wait for it, Si and the Psychotics is the name of his band. And when he comes out to perform, he's wearing a straitjacket at the beginning. So I think he's found his niche. If you wonder sometimes you got a millennial, a layabout, we used to call them in the old days, that just won't get out there and get going. You're like, what am I going to do with this kid? They got to get started. It took Si till he was 63 years old to figure out what he wanted to do. So just hang in there and wait on that millennial. You'll be fine. I want to talk to you a little bit about my dad because his story and Mom's story as well really are what became the impetus for our show and everything else and every success we've had and every difficulty we've had as well. My dad, he went to Louisiana Tech University when he was 18 years old on a college football scholarship. And when you look at him and you see that sort of everybody's all-American look and pose, you wonder how that guy became the Duck Man, you know? How does that transition happen? Do you go into local Tennessee high school and sit down to your guidance counselor and say, you know, I'm thinking about letting myself go. I'm not going to ever shave again and, you know, bathe irregularly, wear deodorant infrequently. I mean, my life will be just how I live it, and yet I will be successful. I will be a voice, and I'll be one of probably the most credible evangelical voices we have in our culture. Comes from my dad, which is amazing. So how does that happen? God has to be involved in that process, because that doesn't just happen by accident, right? I mean, we would say that wasn't a winning proposition, and yet that's exactly what happened with him. When he was at Tech, Terry Bradshaw was his backup, which most people know that by now. It's a pretty interesting story. Bradshaw's talked about it on several occasions. And even when they were honored together a few years ago, first time Dad had been with Bradshaw in 44 years since college. And it was really neat to see them and hear them telling stories about the old days. And they both respect each other greatly. Dad, of course, has had a better spiritual impact than Terry has, but Terry's a good man who helps a lot of people. That night, they honored Dad with the 2014 Alumnus of the Year Award for Louisiana Tech, and they have what they call a Louisiana Tech Hall of Fame, and so here are all these plaques, these brass plaques of the different people. And trust me, Dad's looked the most unique in terms of his look from everybody else's, but even on the other side about what was said about him was very unique as well. There were about 100 plaques, and so when I went to take this picture, I looked at all the other plaques, and I was just kind of reading what was said about them, and they were, you know, industry and great achievements in education and in the government, and of course you had country singers and pro basketball and football players, and I looked at Dad's, and his was unique from everybody else's. As you can see, it says duck hunting icon, which is unique because he's a famous duck hunter. Television personality. I mean, there were a few other TV people. But here's the one that was unmatched, servant of Christ. I noticed, and I'm sure there were other Christians on that wall, but Dad was the only one that mentioned the name of Christ about himself. And actually it was me, because I'm the one that sent it in. But the reason why is because that's what he wants to be known for. Not the duck hunting, not the TV, not the show. He wants to be known as a servant of Christ. And so Dad's story is amazing and incredible. And it was mainly because he had lived for a period of time, about 10 years, from 18 to 28, as not being a Christian. Now, he grew up in the church, so he knew the right way, but he left it. And he's not the only college kid that's ever done that. That's why it's such a difficult, trying, and time when we're really pressed about our college students. And it's even now from Dad's, that was 50 years ago, it's even much more difficult now, and we know why. I mean, we look at college campuses around America, and it's frightening as to what happens there. It's hard to go in there as a son or daughter of the Almighty and keep it together during that period of time in your life. There's so much pressure. Well, Dad felt that pressure as well. And so even after he got out of college and was coaching and teaching at a little high school that was just north of where he went to school, his life began to just take a spiral down. Every year that went by, he got worse than the year before. Finally, so much so that he decided in his wisdom of the moment that he was going to run a bar on the Arkansas-Louisiana line. And Mom would be the barkeep, and he'd be the guy with a pistol in his belt and a shotgun nearby, and that's what we were going to do. That was going to be our life. And we were going to make a ton of money running this bar. And that's where we were in 1972. And our little family was in a real crisis situation. You can see me there and Jace, and Mom is pregnant with Willie. And this family was about to blow apart. It did. But in this picture, this is right before it happened. And so I love showing this picture to audiences because most people only know us as the Duck Dynasty family, people of strong faith and character and conviction, someone willing to stand up when the culture is saying you can't say that and you say it anyway, that sort of thing, which I appreciate. And I'm glad that people look at us that way. But people need to know this picture as well, because without Christ, this picture This family was headed to disaster. It wasn't too long after that, our family split apart because Dad kicked us out one night. And Mom finally, in this terrible place of just not having her husband and not having any man to lead her, finally just turned to Christ and said, you know what? If it's just me and you, Christ, that's what it'll have to be. And you help me raise my boys. So when Dad kicked us out, she went to West Monroe, Louisiana. And there was a church there, Whites Ferry Road Church of Christ. And that's where she was introduced to Christ. Ironically, it would be the same church I would work for 25 years and went there as even a small child. The church took us in. The church helped us get an apartment. The church helped feed us because we didn't have Dad around. We had nothing, literally the clothes on our back the night we left. And yet this church took us in. And the man that mentored and helped my mom is the same man that would later lead my dad to Christ, but that also would mentor me for the first 10, 15 years of my ministry. You see, God had a plan for us in that, and he used the church to do that. I know some of you may be here without a church home. You need that. It's stable. And you never know when a church is going to reach out and help a family. I can't tell you how many times I sat in my office and a young broken family came in, somebody split up, some bad situation, and you know how much compassion I had for them because I could remember back when I was on the other side of that desk. You just pay it forward and you help people. So the family of, Duck Dynasty, this family on the screen couldn't imagine that family in this moment. But the Bible says God gives us more than we can ask or imagine. And that's what he did in our case. And so it was a great blessing. Dad came back, asked Mom's forgiveness, said, I want to find what you have. I want to know that peace, but I don't know how. And she said, well, I know a guy that you need to talk to. And she took him to Bill Smith, the same guy that had talked to her. 3 nights later, he was baptized, and our lives were changed. My dad went from being a complete heathen to John the Baptist. And it didn't take him long to get there either because he was inspired and fired up about it. I want to read you a text from Hebrews chapter 10. And I love this text because to me it's exactly a picture of what happens in any of our lives when we totally give ourselves to God. But it definitely happened in my dad's life. Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings. My dad, when he was first confronted with the gospel and Mom telling him, Phil, you got to listen to this, he said, I don't know how I can believe it. I don't trust anybody. And that's what has to happen. Faith has to then arouse that trust in you that the Almighty means what he says. Having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience. See, that's what happens. Warring in our mind. Terrible thoughts. How can I keep thinking this way? We can be cleansed through Christ and his blood. And having our bodies washed with pure water, a total submission to him. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And so that's what happened in our lives. When Dad finally became a Christian, he and Mom were walking this walk together now, and Dad just had an awakening. I mean, he's like, the blinders have come off. I see it for what it is. So he thought he would just take the path that he was always laid out before. I'm just going to be a teacher and a coach, But then after like a year of that, he was my homeroom teacher. We had a little Christian school, and it was great. I mean, we drove to school together every day, and so finally I had my dad that I never had when I was a young kid. But he hated it. It wasn't what he was called to do. And he just was trying to figure it out. How do I make a living and support my family, but I want to hunt, I want to fish, I want to make a living off the land. My dad was born 100 years too late. He would have been really something back in the late 1800s, but he's probably pretty good in the late 1900s as well. Anyway, out of that awakening, he told Mom, he said, well, I quit my job, Miss Kay. And she said, you what? I quit my job. I'm going to fish the Washita River, me and the boys, and we're going to start Duck Commander. I'm going to start my own duck call business. She said, Phil, do you even know how to build a duck call? He said, nope. But I know how to make one sound like a duck, and God will do the rest. And that's exactly what he did. Our business slowly built as we were doing all the work ourselves, and our family unit was the whole work crew, and we learned everything by trial and error and trust in God. Now, I didn't realize that fishing is a faith-based business until we started commercial fishing in the river. But a lot of times we started out the day down there on our knees on the front of that boat, asking the Almighty to send some Opelousas catfish into our hoop nets that day. And I can't tell you how many times we raised those nets up and they were full. You see, that's the way Jesus did it, didn't he? He picked 4 out of his 12 were fishermen, and how did he impress them? By catching fish. That's what happens when we trust in God. Even in the little things of life, he does amazing things, and that's what he did for us. My dad, not too long after he was converted, had an opportunity to speak in New Orleans. And this was a big deal because we were really just selling calls kind of a half dozen or a dozen at a time, usually store to store. So it was a rough go starting our business, getting it off the ground, because duck calls are typically regional, not national. But Dad was in New Orleans, and I'll never forget it. We had a group about this size. It was about 400 Cajuns, and we're in the floor of the Superdome in a little section over there, and Dad's up doing his duck calls, and he was standing underneath their sign that said Budweiser, King of Beers, like the one you see on the screen, in a big banner. And trust me, about, 398 out of the 400 Cajuns sitting out there were sampling the King of Beers that day, as Cajuns tend to do. And so Dad gets up and he does his duck calling demonstration, and all those Cajuns are like, hey, he's good, he's good. And then as he's about to wrap up, because I've heard it now a few times, he takes his Bible out of his bag. And if you've ever seen Dad's Bible before, he doesn't have it very long for it's got duct tape all over it, and because he uses it daily to share with people. So they just fall apart. Lisa just bought him one off of eBay that has some other guy's name on the front of it. I said, well, Dad, I can't find your Bible anymore. Now you got to assume names, I guess, to be able to use them. That's how many Bibles he goes through. He pulls out that Bible and he says, boys, I'm going to tell y'all something today. Old Anheuser-Busch, and he nodded up at that banner. He said, he definitely is the King of Beers. And boy, I've had a many one of them back in the day. He said, but I gave all that up because in here, this book tells you about the King of Kings, and that's way better than a cold Budweiser. Well, it got quiet, and all the beer was going back behind the legs of the chairs, because everybody gets in a situation like that, I'm not drinking here. So Dad just went through the gospel, and they were stunned. They were quiet. They didn't know what to do. Do we clap? Do we cheer? We never, most of them, if they have any religious background at all, were mostly Catholic. But most of them, I came here to drink and listen to duck calls. They didn't know what to think. But it was a watershed moment for Dad. When he went to walk off the stage, there was a guy there that was selling duck calls with us. His name was Dubuisson. And good guy, but he didn't realize that in that moment, the evil one was using him as a test or a roadblock for Dad. Because when he walked off, he said, Phil, you can't do that. You can't do that. He said, do what? He said, you can't mix religion and business. You fail. Looking at it from a worldly point of view. Dad said, Dubuisson, did you hear what I just said up there? I was talking about dead men coming out of the ground. I was talking about sins being cleansed forever. Without Christ, I would have no business. I will always talk about him. And that set the culture right there, boom, for 40 years of our company and our Christianity and our family. We don't back down. We talk about it. Now in the public squares, you just go to your churches and talk about that. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that in school or some public setting. We will talk about it everywhere because Christ has saved us. How can we not? How could we hold it in when he's done so much for us? So he's been doing it ever since. On the show, the first prayer happened because Dad said, that's what we do. We pray. And we did. And most of you that watched the show and liked it, I can guarantee you that was one of the things that first hooked you in, was that a family was praying on national television unashamedly. And it was different because we hadn't seen that. Now I'm seeing it on other shows. Praise the Lord. I hope it catches on everywhere. And then, of course, Dad got in the middle of a national controversy because a man asked him, was homosexuality a sin? He asked him in his own living room, in his own chair. And he said, well, let me tell you what the Bible says about it. And 2 hours later, we have an article that comes out that all of a sudden our network is backing away, corporations are backing away. You realize that from the day, Dad, the interview broke to the next day, about $20 million vanished from our family out of deals that were there that all of a sudden corporations did what they do. They run and hide because we don't want truth. You know what? We own the whole universe. What's 20 million to us? I mean, we're co-heirs of the whole thing. Are you kidding me? Money's not going to be the difference maker for us. So that's where we learn. That's how we learn. Just like Moses spent about 40 years out the Midian Hilton learning about what pride was versus trusting in God, the Robertson family lived on the side of the riverbank hauling fish up and slowly building duck calls as a humility training for what God would do in us. God knew one day that we would have a national platform to proclaim his message, but we had no idea. So he knew in his infinite wisdom that for us not to think that we were a big deal, he would train us in humility to know that it was him and not us that built it. So how can I take credit for what the Almighty has done? I'm 53 years old, so from an early age, I saw a lot of stuff that my brothers didn't see, which was a great blessing for them. But those things impact you. Those things have a tendency to come back at some point. They did with me. Our family finally had it all together. I had my dad back. We're in a great church. Now we're involved. We're active. And all of a sudden, what happened? Al disappeared. Not on the outside, because I looked great on the outside, on the inside. I checked out. It was just a darkness. First it was girls, and then it spread to everything else, all the usual suspects. And so from the time I was about 14 until I was 18, first double secret agent, in church on Sunday, in the youth group, active, but gone, not there. In fact, I was an evil influence on other people. And I regret, by the way, those 4 years of my life, and I regret the most of what I did to now my wife by breaking her heart during this period of time. She needed someone to guide her out of a bad place, and instead I took her into a darker one. That's something you live with the rest of your life. The blood of Jesus has taken away everything from me and from her, but that doesn't mean I still don't have regret. I hated I wasted an opportunity. I wound up becoming a prodigal son. I went to New Orleans to squander the blessings that God had given me, and I did a great job of it. I found myself one day on the wrong end of a jealous husband's crowbar, and I realized in that moment that if I stayed here any longer, I would die. I was dead spiritually, but I would die physically. And I would just be another statistic of a person in New Orleans killed, another teenager. Happens every day there. And I was right there, ready for the evil one to take away every blessing I've had since. But as it so happened that day, God put a police officer in my life that obviously was a believer and talked to me about home. And he talked to me in such a way that I became very emotional, which I didn't rarely ever do. And I went home. I heeded his advice. Mom and Dad knew I was coming, and they met me in the yard, and I had a speech worked out, and I never got a chance to give it. They were just like the Father described in Luke 15 by Jesus. They met me in the driveway, and they'd been looking for me, and they said, "Welcome home, son." Dad said, "We got duck calls to build." So that night, we killed the fattened catfish and had a celebration because the lost son had come home. And I've never looked back. Not long after that, I placed a fateful call to Lisa. She was dating some guy pretty seriously. I'd heard about it. And so I was still pretty, proud of myself, I guess. So I called her and asked her if she wanted to go out on Friday. And first I said, I heard you're serious with this guy. And she said, "Well, yeah, we're talking about getting married." I said, "Well, you want to go out Friday?" And she said, "You bet I do." So she dropped that guy like a hot rock, I always felt bad for him, but not really. And Dad and I now have such a close relationship. It's great. We do a show together. We did a Bible project together, which we have a few more left, I think, out back. We're doing a show now called In the Woods with Phil. It's on CRTV. It's fantastic. I started a company that produces the show. Dad, of course, is the show, and then I do it sometimes with him. We're about to start a new podcast on CRTV. It's amazing the opportunities we have together. I mean, we're very close, and that wasn't the case for the early part of my life. So I always like to talk about that because I know a room this large with this many people, I can guarantee you somebody in there has some mama or daddy issues. We all do. And maybe some of you haven't resolved them. But I'm telling you, they can be in a great and wonderful way if you let God be in control of it. And you don't let our own pride keep us from that. Our stories, the Robertson family, intersected the story, and that's the story of Jesus Christ. His coming here, his dying for us, his resurrection, his return to the right hand of the Father, and his promise to come back, that story encapsulates life change and transformation. Lisa and I have been working a lot with a group called ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, and you see those are the guys that defend the baker out in California, Jack, who's a wonderful guy, and Barronell. You remember these stories. This group of lawyers. In fact, I quit doing lawyer jokes because I finally met some Christian lawyers that are awesome, that you defend these folks. And one of the cases they were talking about, which just blew me away, it hasn't happened, praise the Lord, but they'll come back. In California, they were going to propose a law this year, they've since backed away, that says you can't write a book, give a speech, or sit down with somebody and counsel any transformational life process. Now, that was going to be a law in California, and they backed off because the implications got big, as you can imagine, as you're sitting here thinking about it today. Now, you know what that was aimed at. It was aimed at the transgender stuff, so you can't tell somebody they can be transformed into a man or a woman. That was the purpose of the law. But think about where that puts us as the body of Christ. Our entire message is about transformation. It's about what God has done in us, and I stand before you as a transformed man. I was a sinner, lost, going to hell, and was going to die and get there as quick as I could. And I was transformed by the blood of Christ. Now, the minute a state in our union makes that illegal, we're going to have a problem with the law of that state. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to keep preaching transformational message. It's not going to stop. That's where we are when we get so far away from the gospel story. So what we have to do as men and women of Christ is, first of all, we've got to obey that ourselves. We've got to live that and be impacted by that. And then we've got to be willing to tell anybody that'll listen. And we all know people that need to know what we know. And so that's the way I want to encourage you this morning. I hope our family continues to be an inspiration to you that love watching the show and love what you've read about us, but only in that it was what Christ did in us. And he does the same thing for any of us. And so we want to extend an invitation to you this morning. If you are not a Christian, and we have some visitors here I know, maybe you've never made that step to Christ, we want to give that opportunity to do that today, to confess him as Lord, to say I want to live for him, and to be baptized right here. I mean, we got the waters ready around here. I like that. And by the way, if you don't have a church home, I've been here about 2.5 hours. These people have been wonderful to me. The preacher seems to be a wonderful guy and his wife. So, I mean, if you need a church home, this seems like a pretty cool place. So I want to encourage you. If you don't have a church home, if you need to make some personal confession yourself, why don't you do that? And we will have an opportunity while we stand and while we sing. If someone wants to come forward and talk to some of the leaders here, you're welcome to do that. Let's stand and let's sing.